They dropped me off at St. Augustine General just after noon. Didn't even park. Peter stayed behind the wheel, engine running, sunglasses still on, as if he couldn't bear to look me in the eye. Maria got out, helped me out of the car like I was luggage, gently, but quickly. Like something fragile you want to put down fast so it doesn't break in your hands. You'll be all right here, Dad. Just for a little while. Just until we figure some things out. Figure some things out. That was the last sentence they gave me. No kiss on the cheek. No, I love you. Just the wind from the car doors slamming shut and the red taillights fading down the hospital loop. And me, standing in the circular drive with a plastic grocery bag holding my medication, a sweater, and a paperback I hadn't touched since Ellen died. My wedding ring was still on a chain around my neck. That, at least, they hadn't taken from me. Nurse Courtney greeted me with a smile. She was young. Pretty in that bright-eyed, burnt-out way nurses often are, too much kindness crushed under too many shifts. Hi, Mr. Carter. Let's get you settled, okay? I wanted to say, I'm Dr. Carter. Not, Mr. Not, just another old man. But the words caught in my throat and turned to dust. Room 418 smelled of bleach and boiled cabbage. The bed had a motor that hummed softly, adjusting to some default position, one meant to protect frail bones. There was a small window. Just enough to see a slice of sky and the flagpole out front. I could tell the wind was blowing hard, the flag jerked and flapped like it was angry to still be standing. I sat on the edge of the bed. The sheets were clean, too white, too tight. The kind of white that makes you feel erased. The last time I had been in this hospital, I was saving someone's life. 27 years ago. Operating room 3. Emergency bypass. A kid named Ray, 19, fresh out of high school. Chest cracked open, heart trembling in my gloved hands. I remember the beep of the monitor when I found the rhythm again. His mother cried in my arms afterward. Now, they handed me a paper wristband and asked if I needed help going to the bathroom. I nodded. I had no intention of using it. But I nodded. Later that night, I stared at the ceiling for hours. My roommate, Greg, snored like a tractor with a broken exhaust. I couldn't blame him. He'd had a stroke last year. Said maybe 10 words a day, all of them in fragments. Pain. Nurse. TV off. I didn't mind the silence. It gave me room to think. And remember. I raised 2 children, Peter and Maria. Paid for college. Ballet. Orthodontics. Bail, once, for Peter, when he punched a cop after a bar fight in college. I stood up for them, covered for them, gave when I had nothing left. And now they couldn't give me a Sunday visit. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't come with screaming. No slammed doors, no hateful words. Just absence. The kind that rots your bones slower than cancer. But deeper. I used to believe in legacies. In love that carried on, that paid you back in soft words and strong hands when yours got weak. But now, I only believed in memories. And how much they hurt when there's no one left to share them with. There's a single chair in this room, by the window. One of those fake leather things, stiff and peeling at the arms. I started sitting in it every morning after the nurse brought my pills and dry toast. It faced east, caught a bit of sun around 8:15, and if I craned my neck just right, I could watch people arriving in the parking lot. Nurses, visitors, sometimes a priest. All of them with purpose. All of them going somewhere. I hadn't gone anywhere in 27 days. Courtney would knock gently, bring my schedule, blood pressure, blood sugar, therapy at noon. Once, she smiled and said, "You're making progress, Mr. Carter. Stronger every day." Stronger for what? I wanted to ask. But I just nodded again. I was getting good at that. Nodding. Smiling. Shrinking. One morning, while watching a mother help her son out of the car, I had a thought so sharp it nearly cut through me. Would Peter have done that, once? Held my hand. Looked for my face in the crowd? Memory is cruel. It gives you warmth just to burn you. I remember holding Peter's tiny fingers when he had his tonsils out at 5. He cried until he saw me. Held on to my coat, hiccuping, "Don't go, Daddy." And I didn't. I stayed all night, sitting in a chair much like this one. He wouldn't sleep unless I hummed, "You Are My Sunshine" under my breath. Now, my phone stayed silent for weeks. The screen showed only the date. Not his name. Maria had texted once. "Sorry Dad, things are crazy with the girls. Love you though." That was 16 days ago. No call. No visit. No apology. One afternoon, a man was wheeled into the room across the hall. Name was Ronald, mid-70s maybe. Thick southern accent and a cough that rattled the walls. He had visitors. Lots of them. Grandkids. Grown sons. A woman who called him Ronnie Bear. They brought cookies, balloons, laughter. It made me sick with jealousy. And shame for feeling that way. Greg turned to me that night, his first real sentence in days. "Nice to have people." I nodded. Yeah. But I wanted to scream. What makes some of us worth remembering? Why do some men get visits and others get replaced? 2 nights later, I had a fall. Got dizzy walking to the bathroom, hit the wall hard enough to rattle a painting. My ribs ached. I didn't call the nurse. Didn't want another lecture. I crawled back to bed. Laid there for hours, eyes open. I didn't feel scared. I felt invisible. That was the scariest part. The next morning, as the sun crept over the windowsill, I made a decision. Not a loud one. Not like in the movies, where the music swells and the hero stares into the distance. No. Just a quiet breath. Enough. If I was going to die here, they would not find a broken man. If I was going to live, it would be on my own terms. That day, I shaved. By myself. Cut my chin twice, but I didn't care. I asked for books from the hospital library. Real books. Hemingway. Baldwin. Carson McCullers. I walked farther than they asked me to in therapy. I refused help with lunch. I started asking Greg questions, about his job, his life, his regrets. He told me his daughter hadn't called in months either. We laughed like criminals sharing a secret. And when Courtney came in and said, "You look different today," I looked her in the eye and said, "That's because I am." Something inside me had shifted. Not healed, not yet. But rearranged. They had left me here to shrink. To forget myself. But in this silence, I had found something. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But power. A quiet, smoldering kind. The kind that waits. They call it the memory room, though there's no sign on the door. Just room 407. 2 floors below mine. Courtney told me about it one afternoon as she adjusted my meds. It's mostly used for dementia patients, she said. Quiet space. Some of them respond to old objects, photos, smells. She said it casually, not realizing the irony. I didn't go right away. I didn't want to be lumped in with the memory loss floor. I still remembered everything. That was the problem. But something about the idea stuck with me. A place for memory. A room where time still listened. I asked Greg if he'd ever gone. He grunted. Full of ghosts. I went anyway. Room 407 smelled like old newspapers and lemon polish. There were record players, a collection of dusty vinyls, Sinatra, Nina Simone, Elvis. A rotary phone on a side table, not plugged in. Shelves of black and white photos, soldiers, weddings, children in strollers from the 50s. And in the corner, an old doctor's coat, framed behind glass. Faded white. Gold embroidery above the chest pocket. James Carter, M.D. I stopped breathing. The coat was mine. From my residency at Mount Sinai, 1978. I hadn't seen it in decades. I hadn't known it still existed. My name. There. Real. Preserved. I didn't cry. I burned. They had erased me so easily. But here I was. Proof. The nurse in the room, an older woman named Linda, noticed my reaction. "You okay, sir?" I pointed. "That coat, it's mine." She smiled like I was confused. "Oh, no. That was donated years ago. From a retired surgeon, I think. I am that surgeon." She blinked. James Carter. Mount Sinai. Class of '78. I wore that coat every day for 3 years. I saved lives in that coat. I held a dying boy's heart in that coat. I taught interns with my name on their trembling lips in that coat. Silence. Then, quietly. "Would you like us to take it down for you?" I shook my head. "No. Leave it. Let them see. Let the forgetful remember." I sat in the old leather chair by the phonograph, next to a cracked chessboard. The pieces were mid-game, someone had left the black queen hanging. I adjusted it with one finger. Across the room, an old woman in a yellow sweater stared at a photo of a man in uniform. She turned to me, suddenly. "They think we don't know who we were." Her voice was sharp. Still full of fight. I nodded. "But we remember." That night, I dreamed I was in the ore again. The lights above me. The music playing low. A young nurse, Ellen, before she was my wife, handing me the scalpel. "Save him, James," she said. And I did. Again and again. Because that's who I was. Not a burden. Not a mistake. A man who mattered. When I woke, I knew what I had to do. Let them know. Without begging. Without yelling. Without stooping to the level of people who discard those who built them. Peter and Maria thought they had closed the book. But I had more to write. I asked the nurse if I could mail a letter. She smiled, handed me stationery. I didn't write to my children. I wrote to his children, Ray Sanders, the boy I saved in '94. "Dear Mr. Sanders," I began. "You may not remember me. But I remember you." I told him about the surgery. His mother's hands in mine. How I watched him live. I ended with. "Someone once said doctors play God. That's not true. We just borrow hope from him for a little while, and try to give it back before the end. I hope your life was worth it." I mailed it the next morning. Not for a reply. But to remind myself, I didn't need permission to matter. The day began like all the others, gray light, cold oatmeal, silence. Greg had gone home the week before. His daughter finally showed up. Apologized through tears, packed his things, wheeled him out herself. I stood by the window and watched them hug near the parking lot. "Don't let them forget you," he said before he left. "I won't," I replied. But I still stood in that room, alone. I had just sat down in the chair by the window, book in hand, eyes heavy, when the knock came. 3 soft taps. I turned. A boy, no more than 20, stood in the doorway. Nervous hands, cheap sneakers, blue hoodie. Brown eyes. Clear. Wide. Like he was seeing something he couldn't believe. Are you Dr. Carter? I blinked. My throat went dry. Yes. He stepped inside. Looked around like he expected to be kicked out. I'm Jacob. Jacob Sanders. My father's Ray. Ray. I stood, almost too fast, felt my knees threaten me. I caught the bed rail, steadied myself. I remember Ray. He smiled. He remembers you too. I motioned to the chair across from mine. He sat. Hands folded like a child in church. He got your letter, Jacob said. He cried. First time I ever saw him cry. A pause. He's not well. Early Parkinson's. But when I read the letter to him, he looked at me and said, "That man gave me life. Go tell him I didn't waste it." My chest tightened. He's got 3 grandkids, Jacob said, pulling out his phone. Wants you to see. He showed me photos, birthdays, baseball games, a little girl in a white dress smiling so wide I thought my heart might split open. He became a teacher. Taught science for 25 years. He always told us, my life started twice. Once when I was born. Once when Dr. Carter gave me a second shot. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Tears slid down without permission. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet proof that my soul still worked. Jacob leaned forward. You were never forgotten, sir. Maybe by some. But not by the ones who mattered. After he left, I sat back in the chair, clutching the photo he'd left with me. I stared out the window. The wind had calmed. A single golden leaf spiraled down from the tree outside. I followed it all the way to the ground. That night, Maria called. For the first time in weeks. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Dad? Her voice was cautious. Sweet. Like she was rehearsing kindness. Yes. Hey, I know it's been crazy. Work's insane, the girls. I know, I cut in. Not cruel. Just done pretending. She was silent. I heard from Ray Sanders today, I said. She paused. Who? Exactly. Another pause. Then, I want to visit. Maybe bring the girls. I looked at the photo in my lap. A different family. One that never forgot. Maybe, I said. But not today. It wasn't revenge. It was a reminder. That love isn't owed, it's chosen. And just because someone shares your blood doesn't mean they deserve your heart. Something in me shifted after Jacob's visit. Not loudly. Not suddenly. More like an ember that had been buried under ash, quietly glowing back to life. A warmth I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. The next morning, when the physical therapist, a young woman named Hannah, came to walk with me, I didn't shuffle behind her like usual. I led. Slow down, Dr. Carter, she laughed. Can't, I said. I've wasted too much time already. We made it halfway down the corridor before my legs trembled. But I didn't stop. I pushed until sweat slipped down my back, until Hannah insisted we rest. You're different today, she said as we sat on the bench by the elevator. I remembered something, I answered. What's that? That I wasn't always waiting for someone to save me. She didn't know what to say, but her eyes softened. Word spreads quickly in places like hospitals. By lunch, 2 nurses had asked if I could speak to a patient down the hall, a man refusing treatment after a heart attack. Maybe you can convince him, they said. He listens to no one. I almost refused. I wasn't a doctor anymore. I was just a man killing time between visiting hours that never came. But then I thought of Ray. Of Jacob. Of the photo now tucked behind the lamp on my nightstand. All right, I said. Let's see him. Room 422 smelled like fear, the sharp, restless kind you learn to recognize after decades in medicine. The patient was a large man, maybe mid-50s, arms crossed tightly over his chest like armor. "I'm not letting them cut me open," he snapped before I even spoke. "Not happening." I pulled up a chair. Sat slow, deliberate. He frowned. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been cut open more times than I'd like," I said. "Metaphorically, anyway." He snorted. "Great. Philosopher." "No," I said. "A doctor. Or I used to be." He stared at me. Hard. "And? Did it matter?" I leaned in, elbows on my knees. "Yes. It mattered to the people who lived. To their families. To the ones who learned they weren't finished yet." He looked away. "You're scared," I said. "That tells me you want to live." His jaw tightened. His eyes watered, just a little, the way men pretend isn't happening. I didn't push. I just waited. Finally, he whispered, "I don't want to die." "Then don't," I said. "But you have to choose it." When I left his room, a nurse caught my arm. "He agreed to the surgery," she whispered. "Whatever you said, it worked." I didn't respond. Not with words. But deep inside, something uncurled. A quiet fire spreading through my ribs. From that day on, patients started calling me document. Nurses asked me to talk to people who refused medication or therapy. I'd sit in their rooms, listen to their stories, remind them, gently, firmly, that their lives mattered. Not as a job. As a calling I thought I'd lost. And with every conversation, every small victory, I felt myself expanding back into the shape of the man I once was. Not because my children remembered me. But because strangers did. Because I did. A week later, Peter finally called. "Dad, can we talk?" "I'm listening," I said, calm as still water. "I heard you've been different." "Who told you that?" He hesitated. "Maria said, the nurses said." "So you talked to your sister," I said. "But not to me." A long silence crackled through the phone. "Dad. I'm sorry." "For what?" "For everything." I let the quiet stretch. Not for punishment. For truth. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. "You don't need to apologize to feel better. You need to apologize to be better." He inhaled sharply. "I want to visit," he said. "I know," I replied. "But not today." This time, I ended the call. Not out of anger. But clarity. They hadn't expected me to rise. To grow. To burn quietly. They thought they had left behind a man fading. Instead, they created a man awakening. On my final week at St. Augustine, they asked me if I'd be willing to speak at the community room for Wellness Wednesday. The usual speaker, a retired therapist, had cancelled. Courtney asked gently, like she expected me to say no. "I'm not a motivational speaker," I said. "You're something better," she replied. "You've lived." I agreed. But not for them. For me. They wheeled in half a dozen residents, some half awake, others bored. A few nurses stood near the back, sipping lukewarm coffee. It wasn't a crowd looking for a sermon. Good. I wasn't giving one. I walked up slowly, legs shaking slightly but spine tall. "I'm not here to inspire you," I said, straight off. "I'm here because someone once tried to make me feel like I no longer mattered." And I almost believed them. Some heads lifted. "I was a doctor," I continued. "I've held a beating heart in my hands. I've been thanked in whispers and shouted at in grief. I've been called a hero, and later, a burden." I paused. Let the silence settle. They say getting old is hard. It's not. Getting forgotten, that's what kills you. Now the room was still. I raised 2 children. Paid for braces, soccer jerseys, court fees. I showed up, every time, even when I was exhausted. And one day, they stopped showing up for me. I looked down for a moment. Breathed. But here's what I've learned. I stepped closer to the front row. You can disappear in a house full of people. And you can be found in a hospital full of strangers. A few heads nodded. Dignity isn't given back to you. You have to reclaim it. Quietly. Fiercely. You don't yell. You stand. I pointed to my chest. I remembered who I was. Not because my children reminded me. But because I reminded myself. I leaned forward, whispered now, voice like flint. And you, every single one of you, are not leftovers. You are not mistakes. You are what remains after the world stops applauding. The room was silent. Then, soft claps. Then louder. Not standing ovation. Something better. Respect. The kind that doesn't shout. Just listens. That evening, Maria came. Unannounced. She brought the girls, both of them awkward, hugging their phones more than me. But I smiled. Offered tea. Listened. She tried to apologize again. This time I let her. When she finished, I stood, walked over to the drawer, and handed her something. A copy of the letter I had sent to Ray Sanders. She read it in silence. "Who's this?" she asked. "Someone whose life I saved." Her eyes watered. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I wanted you to see what you forgot." She tried to speak, but I shook my head gently. "You don't have to make up for it," I said. "You just have to understand it." Then I kissed her forehead. Not out of warmth. Out of closure. 2 days later, I was discharged. They offered to call someone to pick me up. I said no. I walked out with my bag, coat in hand, chest full of wind. I took a cab to a small apartment I'd found, quiet, modest, but mine. Set the photo of Ray's family on the shelf. Made tea. And sat. Not alone. Just with myself. People often imagine revenge as thunder. But sometimes, it's silence. Not the silence of being ignored. But the silence of not needing to be heard to know your worth. Final lines. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I stood. And that was enough.
Subscribe and like. And tell your friends about this video.